I was standing in the courthouse parking lot watching strangers bid on my house, $15,000 going, once the auctioneer's voice echoing off the cold concrete. And I kept asking myself, how did I get here? My HOA president, Karen Whitmore, had decided that the windows she personally approved were suddenly illegal. She thought she could destroy my life over home improvements I had written permission for. But Karen made one fatal mistake. She did not know. I document everything, every lie, every threat, every violation notice from those miserable community center meetings. Fast forward 5 years, and I was holding a $75,000 check with her signature right there in ink. She had no idea what she started when she messed with the wrong electrician. So what would you do if your HOA tried to steal your house over approved renovations? My name is Marcus Hendricks, 52 years old, union electrician, and I thought I understood. Power, turns out, I knew nothing about the kind of power that comes with a clipboard and a bad attitude. After my divorce, I needed somewhere safe for Emma's weekend visits. My 16-year-old daughter had already been through enough chaos. I wanted stability. Willowbrook Estates looked perfect. Quiet streets, kids on bikes, the smell of barbecue drifting from backyards on summer evenings. The house needed work, but that was my specialty. Those original 1973 windows were bleeding money every winter. Single-pane aluminum frames that practically invited the cold inside. I spent months researching replacements, double-pane vinyl energy, efficient, historically appropriate style. Here is where I made my first mistake. I trusted the system. I submitted my architectural request, like a good homeowner, photos, specifications, contractor credentials, the whole package. The HOA had 30 days to respond on day 28. I got my approval letter request approved for installation, clear as daylight, signed by the architectural committee, professional installation, city permits, inspector approval, everything by the book. Those windows looked fantastic and cut my heating bill in half. For exactly 14 days, I thought I had won the homeowner lottery. Then Karen Whitmore decided to destroy my life. Karen was our HOA president, and she ran Willowbrook like her personal dictatorship real estate agent, by trade control freak, by nature picture, someone who would weaponize a homeowners association because she enjoyed watching people squirm. Blonde bob like a helmet, leather portfolio, like a shield and a smile that could freeze hell. I was flipping burgers for Emma when my phone exploded. Mr. Hendricks, your unauthorized modifications are unacceptable. Karen, I have written approval. Approval was conditional pending final board review. I stared at my letter. No conditions anywhere. Where does it say that? Click deadline. Tuesday night, I walked into that community center with my approval letter and righteous confidence. Bad move. The place smelled like industrial coffee and crushed dreams. Karen sat behind a folding table like she was presiding over war crimes trials. Your window installation violates community standards, she announced, sliding a violation notice toward me like a death sentence. I held up my approval. You already said yes. Approval does not guarantee compliance. Her pen scratched across another form with the sound of bureaucratic revenge. $500 fine, 30 days to pay $500 for following their rules. I looked around at my neighbors. Every face turned away. The silence in that room was deafening. That was when it hit me. Karen was not enforcing rules. She was making examples. The violation notice came with a threat. Buried in legal language, fines double monthly until compliance. I dug through my HOA paperwork that night, tracing the financial nightmare Karen had just unleashed. Month 1, 500 month, 2, 1,000 month, 3, 2,000. My post-divorce budget could not survive this math. Lawyers wanted $5,000 up front just to read the case. I was looking at financial suicide. Either way, pay Karen's escalating ransom or pay attorneys to fight her. But here is what Karen did not know about electricians. We troubleshoot for a living. When a circuit shorts, we trace every wire until we find the problem. And I was about to discover that Karen Whitmore had been shorting this entire neighborhood. The real kicker was that while researching my options, I drove around Willowbrook counting identical window replacements, 47 houses, with the exact same vinyl windows I had installed, 47 neighbors who had never received violation notices. Karen was not enforcing community standards. She was running a protection racket, and I had just become her newest target. The question was what made me different from those other 47 homeowners. I was about to find out, and the answer would change everything. Karen's revenge came swift and brutal. 2 weeks after embarrassing her at that community meeting, I found a certified letter waiting like a venomous snake in my mailbox property lien notice for $2,000. My hands actually shook as I read the breakdown. The original $500 fine had somehow mutated into a financial monster: late fees, administrative costs, enforcement expenses. Karen had weaponized bureaucracy itself. But the real knife twist was buried in paragraph 3. Failure to satisfy lien may result in foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure over windows she had personally approved. I called Janet Bennett that evening, my 73-year-old neighbor who kept the most beautiful garden in Willowbrook. Her voice trembled when she answered, and I knew Karen had gotten to her too. "Oh, Marcus, I was hoping you would call. Karen stopped by yesterday asking questions about your situation, whether you seemed financially stable, whether Emma visits regularly, whether you maintain your property." Janet's pause stretched like a held breath. "She is building a case against you." Then came the revelation that changed everything she did. The same thing to me last year. Said my garden gnomes violated aesthetic standards. I am 73 years old, Marcus. I moved the gnomes rather than fight after hanging up. I spent the entire night researching Ohio property law on my laptop. The blue screen burning my tired eyes. That was when I stumbled across something that made me sit up straight back in electrical school. Our instructor always said, know the code before you run. The wire turned out HOA liens follow the same principle. You better know the legal requirements before you file the paperwork. Ohio law was crystal clear. HOA liens require proper legal notice with a 30-day cure period. Karen had skipped straight to the lien filing. Her entire threat was built on quicksand, and she was betting I would not know the difference. The next morning I drove to the county recorder's office basement. The place smelled like decades of moldering paperwork and crushed dreams. But buried in those files I found Karen's fatal error. Her lien was missing 3 required legal documents. She had cut corners because she assumed a blue-collar electrician would not understand property law. Wrong assumption. I photocopied everything, filed my formal challenge, and walked out with my first legal victory buzzing through my veins like good voltage. But Karen was nowhere. Near finished, she called an emergency board meeting to clarify window policies when I arrived at the community center. The air itself felt different, charged with Karen's desperation, and that eternally burnt coffee smell. The board has determined that previous approvals were issued in error. She announced, reading from a script, all non-conforming windows must be replaced within 60 days. I stood up my work boots loud on the linoleum. You cannot retroactively change approvals. Karen, that is breach of contract. Mr. Hendricks, you are out of order. No. You are out of line. I held up my research like a winning lottery ticket. Your lien is invalid. You never provided proper legal notice under state law. Karen's face cycled through white, then red, then something approaching purple. This meeting is adjourned, but the damage was done. I had humiliated her in front of the remaining board members, and Karen Whitmore collected grudges, like some people collect stamps. The retaliation came fast. A collections agency started calling Debt Recovery Solutions, some outfit from Columbus that made their living terrorizing homeowners. Mr. Hendricks, you owe $2,400. We can garnish wages and seize bank accounts. That lien is invalid. I filed a legal challenge. Our client says otherwise. Sleep became a luxury I could not afford. Emma noticed during her weekend visit, her 16-year-old eyes too perceptive for comfort. Dad, you look exhausted. What is wrong? How do you explain that the neighborhood bully is trying to steal your house? I pulled her into a hug instead. Just some boring adult stuff, sweetheart. That was when I started my documentation obsession. I converted the spare bedroom into a command center timeline, covering one wall, copies of every document, photos of windows throughout the neighborhood. If Karen wanted to play games, I would learn the rules better than she knew them. The breakthrough came when I started mapping her enforcement patterns. 47 houses with identical windows, but the violations followed a disturbing pattern. Every targeted homeowner was either a renter minority or working class like me. Karen's country club friends got friendly reminders for identical violations, was staring at systematic discrimination disguised as community standards. Then Karen dropped her nuclear option an expensive HOA attorney from Columbus. His first letter arrived on letterhead that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. Demand for immediate compliance and payment of all outstanding fines, now totaling $3,600. Karen was doubling down. Betting financial pressure would break me. She had no idea she was teaching an electrician how to trace the biggest short circuit in neighborhood history. Karen's expensive Columbus attorney did not believe in subtle threats. His letter arrived on cream-colored paper with gold-embossed lettering like it was meant to intimidate me into submission notice of intent to foreclose. Your client has 30 days to satisfy all outstanding obligations or face sheriff's sale. The words hit me like touching a live wire without gloves. That weekend, I grabbed my measuring tape and my camera for the most important job of my life. Except instead of tracing circuits, I was documenting discrimination house by house, window by window. I photographed every vinyl replacement in Willowbrook Estates, the smell of autumn leaves crunched under my boots as I walked streets I once thought were safe. What I discovered made my stomach turn. 47 houses with identical windows to mine. Mrs. Patterson on Elm Street, married to the bank president, had the exact same brand, style, and installation date as mine. Not only did she avoid violations, but the HOA meeting minutes actually praised her for community-minded improvements. 3 blocks away, Carlos Martinez had been hit with massive fines for those same windows, his crime being a mechanic who rented instead of owned. Karen's violation. Notice called his windows inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetic standards. Same windows, different treatment. The pattern was crystal clear back home. My spare bedroom had transformed into something between a detective's evidence room and an electrician's. Troubleshooting station photos covered every wall, connected with colored string to a neighborhood map, blue pins for Karen's friends who got warnings, red pins for people like me who got fines. The red pins told a story that made my hands shake. Tuesday evening. Janet Bennett called in a whisper. "Marcus, I found something you need to see. Can you come over quietly?" Janet's kitchen smelled like jasmine tea and decades of careful silence. She handed me a manila folder with trembling fingers, her eyes darting toward the window, like Karen might be watching. I saved everything from my garden gnome fight last year. I thought maybe someday someone braver than me might need this. Inside that folder was dynamite, disguised as paperwork email exchanges between Karen and other board members that would make a civil rights lawyer's heart race. One email stopped my breathing. "We need to be strategic about enforcement target renters and blue-collar types. First, they are less likely to have legal resources to fight back." Legal resources. Karen had profiled me from day one, betting a divorced electrician could not afford justice. "Janet, why did you not fight this? This is smoking gun discrimination evidence." Her weathered hand smoothed the folder. "Closed, because I am a 73-year-old Chinese widow and Karen Whitmore runs this place like her personal empire. Who would have believed me?" That night I researched fair housing law until my eyes burned from the screen. Turns out selective HOA enforcement based on race or economic status violates federal law, not just HOA rules, but actual crimes with real penalties. Karen was not just a petty neighborhood tyrant. She was running an illegal discrimination scheme the next morning, called Ohio Legal Aid. My hands shaking. The intake specialist perked up when I described my evidence. "Sir, if you can document systematic patterns, this becomes a federal fair housing case. How much documentation do you have 3 boxes full with? Photos and timelines going back 5 years hold everything. Do not talk to anyone. We are assigning an attorney immediately. Sarah Martinez met me 2 days later in a conference room that smelled like fresh coffee and possibility. She spread my photos. Across the table like a winning poker hand, her eyes lighting up with each piece of evidence. Marcus, this is textbook housing, discrimination, selective enforcement, economic profiling, racial targeting. Karen violated about 6 federal laws. Sarah leaned forward, tapping the timeline I had created. She made one fatal mistake, picking an electrician to bully electricians. Know how to trace problems to their source. Most people see individual violations. You documented the entire corrupt system. But Karen was not surrendering. Her attorney filed for expedited foreclosure, claiming I posed imminent community risk. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday, 4 days away. Emma found me Thursday night, surrounded by legal briefs and cold coffee, preparing for the fight of our lives. Dad, you look terrified. Is someone really trying to steal our house? I pulled her close, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. Remember when that kid Tyler kept stealing your lunch money until you told the principal? Yeah, and he got suspended sometimes. Bullies do not stop until someone forces them to stop. Karen has been stealing people's lunch money for years through these fake violations. Tomorrow I am telling the principal. Emma squeezed my hand. Good. Tyler needed that lesson too. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Walking into that courthouse carrying 3 boxes of evidence, I spotted Karen across the hallway in her expensive suit, with her confident smirk. She thought she was fighting a scared electrician. She had no idea she was about to face a federal discrimination case. The courtroom felt like a freezer, but sweat still dripped down my back as Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the case files. Karen sat ramrod straight beside her attorney, radiating the confidence of someone who had never lost a legal fight to a blue-collar worker. She was about to learn that confidence and competence are not the same thing. Your Honor, Karen's attorney began. Mr. Hendricks has willfully violated community covenants for 18 months. The HOA has shown remarkable patience, but continued defiance threatens neighborhood stability. Remarkable patience. I almost laughed out loud. Then it was Sarah Martinez's turn. She stood slowly like a gunslinger in an old western and dropped the first bombshell. Your Honor, we are filing a federal fair housing counterclaim. The evidence shows systematic discrimination targeting minority and working-class residents. Sarah opened my first evidence box. We have documented proof of selective enforcement spanning 5 years. Judge Morrison's eyebrows shot up. Karen's attorney went pale. This was not supposed to be about discrimination. This was supposed to be a simple HOA foreclosure. But the real earthquake came when Sarah presented Janet Bennett's email folder. Your Honor, we have internal HOA communications explicitly discussing targeting strategies based on residents' economic status and likelihood to mount legal defense. She read Karen's email aloud. Target renters and blue-collar types. First, they are less likely to have legal resources. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression shifting from bored routine to sharp attention. Karen's face cycled through confusion, panic, then something approaching rage. She leaned over to whisper furiously at her attorney, but the damage was spreading like electrical fire through dry insulation. Your Honor, Sarah continued, 47 houses in Willowbrook Estates have identical window installations, 0 violations for residents connected to the HOA president, 100% enforcement against minority and working-class homeowners. Judge Morrison called a 30-minute recess. Karen's attorney spent those 30 minutes on his phone, probably calling his malpractice insurance carrier. When court resumed, the judge's tone had completely changed. This court is deeply troubled by allegations of discriminatory enforcement. Mr. Hendricks, your foreclosure case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am ordering a complete investigation of HOA practices and referring this matter to the federal prosecutor's office. Karen's world crumbled in real time. The confident smirk melted into something resembling panic as she realized this was not just about my house anymore. Federal prosecutors meant criminal charges. Criminal charges meant prison time. Walking out of that courthouse felt like the first sunny day after a year-long storm. But Karen was not. Finished? Desperate people do desperate things. The harassment escalated immediately. Anonymous complaints flooded the city about my unlicensed electrical work at home. Code enforcement showed up 3 times in 2 weeks, finding nothing but costing. Me lost work time for mandatory inspections. Someone reported my truck for commercial vehicle violations in a residential zone. Parking tickets appeared like magic. Even when I was parked legally, then came the phone calls, heavy breathing hang-ups. Threats mumbled in disguised voices, drop the lawsuit or you will regret it. Classic intimidation tactics that might have worked on someone without 3 boxes of federal evidence. The breaking point came when Emma called me crying from school. Someone had contacted her guidance counselor with concerns about her home environment and possible neglect. Due to father's legal troubles, they dragged my 16-year-old daughter into their war. That night, I sat in my evidence room staring at 5 years worth of Karen's documented abuse, phone records, emails, violation patterns, financial manipulation. She had been running Willowbrook Estates like her personal kingdom, driving out anyone who did not fit her vision of proper residence, but buried in those records, I found something that changed everything. Property tax records showed Karen owned 3 rental houses in Willowbrook through an LLC called KW Holdings Houses she had never disclosed to the HOA board, despite clear conflict of interest. Requirements houses that had identical window violations she had ignored for her own financial benefit. One of those rental properties had the exact same windows I had been fined for not similar, identical same manufacturer, same style installed. By the same contractor, Karen had not just been discriminating against working-class residents, she had been manipulating property values to benefit her real estate investment portfolio. The scope of her corruption was breathtaking selective enforcement. Drove down property values, creating buying opportunities for her investment LLC. She had been systematically gaming the housing market using HOA authority as her weapon. I called Sarah Martinez at home. I found it the smoking gun that connects everything. What did you find? Karen owns rental property in the neighborhood. Property with the exact windows. She has been fining other people for installing. Sarah's silence stretched for a long moment. Then Marcus. You just turned this from a discrimination case into a federal RICO investigation. Karen has been running a criminal enterprise. 3 weeks after the federal referral, I was sitting in my evidence room at midnight when the pieces finally clicked into place. Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen when you are not looking for them, like finding a short circuit in the last place you would think to check. I had been digging through 5 years of county property records, cross-referencing HOA board decisions with real estate transactions. The smell of burnt coffee filled the room as my printer spat out deed transfers and tax assessments. That was when I found the shell company KW Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware, had purchased 3 properties in Willowbrook Estates over the past 4 years. The registered agent was listed as Kevin Whitmore, Karen's husband. But the real shocker was the timing of these purchases. Every single property had been bought within 6 months of receiving major HOA violations. The Martinez house on Oak Street. Carlos had been hammered with window fines, deck violations, and landscaping. Citations: the stress drove his family to sell below market value. KW Holdings swooped in with a cash offer 20% under asking price, the Thompson rental on Pine Street. An elderly couple got cited for fence height, shed placement, and excessive holiday decorations. After 18 months of escalating fines, they sold to avoid foreclosure. Again, KW Holdings bought at a massive discount the Bennett property next to Janet. Her late husband's tools in the garage supposedly violated residential use standards. The harassment continued until Janet's daughter convinced her to sell and move to assisted living. Guess who bought it? My hands shook as I traced the money trail. Karen had not just been discriminating against working-class residents. She had been systematically terrorizing homeowners to create investment opportunities for her family's real estate empire. But the smoking gun was right there in the property files. 2847 Maple Street, purchased by KW Holdings 18 months ago. For $43,000 below market value, according to the listing photos, this house had the exact same vinyl windows. I had been fined for identical same manufacturer, same color, same grid pattern, installed by the same contractor Karen had been. Collecting rent on a property with the illegal windows, she was trying to foreclose on me for installing the violation records told the whole story. The previous owners, the Patels, had received their first window citation 3 years ago. The fines escalated monthly, $500, $1,000, $2,000, until they faced foreclosure rather than lose everything they sold to the first cash buyer. KW Holdings' Karen's signature was on every violation notice, every fine escalation, every board decision that drove the Patels into financial panic. Then I found the insurance records that made my blood boil. KW Holdings had filed a homeowner's insurance claim for storm damage to those same windows. 6 months after purchase, they collected $8,000 for replacing windows that supposedly violated HOA standards. Karen had been running a protection racket disguised as community enforcement. The scale was staggering. Over 4 years, KW Holdings had acquired properties worth $400,000 at 60 cents on the dollar, a profit of $160,000 through systematic harassment. Every targeted homeowner fit the same profile: elderly, minority, working class, or renters, people without resources to fight. Long legal battles, people who would sell cheap rather than face foreclosure. I cross-referenced Karen's real estate license with the property sales. She had been the listing agent on 2 of the distressed sales, collecting commission on properties. Her HOA harassment had devalued double-dipping on her own corruption, but the most damning evidence was an email I found in the county's electronic filing system. Karen had submitted a complaint about declining property values due to non-conforming improvements. The same month her LLC bought the Martinez house, she had literally cited her own manufactured violations as justification for buying below market. Federal investigators love patterns, and Karen had handed them a 5-year timeline of criminal enterprise, conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, racketeering. She had violated enough federal laws to fill a small prison. I called Sarah at 6 in the morning. Sarah, I found the mother lode Karen has been running. A real estate scam using HOA authority. We are not just talking discrimination anymore. What are we talking about? Criminal conspiracy? Spanning 5 years and $500,000 in fraudulent property manipulation. Karen thought she was collecting rent checks. She was actually collecting federal evidence. The next morning, Sarah called an emergency meeting. Her law office conference room smelled like fresh coffee and impending justice as she spread my research across a table. Marcus, what you have uncovered is not just HOA abuse. It is organized crime. Sarah's eyes gleamed with the intensity of a prosecutor who had found her white whale within hours. She had assembled what looked like a legal SWAT team. Rebecca Bennett, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud, David Rodriguez, a federal housing discrimination expert, and the big gun assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, who prosecuted public corruption cases for the Southern District of Ohio. The strategy session felt like watching a master electrician plan a complex rewiring job, every connection mapped, every circuit traced, every potential failure point identified. Here is how we dismantle Karen's operation, Sarah explained, pointing to a timeline that now covered an entire wall. Federal RICO charges require proving a pattern of criminal activity. We have 5 years of systematic property manipulation. That is our pattern. Rebecca, the forensic accountant, had been tearing into KW Holdings bank records with the enthusiasm of someone who lived for spreadsheet detective work. The money trail is beautiful in its stupidity. She said Karen and Kevin used the same bank account. For HOA fees and rental property purchases, every property acquisition directly lines up with an HOA enforcement action. But we needed more than just financial records. We needed victims willing to testify, and that meant tracking down the families. Karen had driven away. Janet Bennett became our secret weapon. Despite being 73 and terrified of Karen, she had kept meticulous records of every harassment campaign. More importantly, she had maintained contact with families who had fled. Willowbrook the Patels moved to Toledo after Karen destroyed them. Janet whispered during one of our kitchen table meetings. Maria Santos went back to Puerto Rico. The Johnson family relocated to Kentucky, but they all kept documents because they knew something was wrong. I spent the next week playing detective, driving across counties, making phone calls to strangers, explaining that I was fighting the same battle they had already lost. Each story was the same pattern: systematic harassment. Escalating fines, forced sale to KW Holdings. The Patels wept when I told them it had been deliberate, not random bad luck, 40 years of equity gone, because they could not afford lawyers to fight fake violations. David Rodriguez, our housing expert, was building the federal discrimination case with methodical precision. He had charted 8 years of HOA enforcement demographics. The numbers were devastating. 93% of major violations targeted minority or working-class families. Zero enforcement against country club members or real estate professionals. Karen did not just discriminate. David explained she weaponized discrimination for profit that elevates this from civil rights violation to criminal conspiracy. Meanwhile, Jennifer Walsh, the assistant U.S. attorney, was coordinating with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Turns out Karen's operation had been pinging multiple federal databases for months. Wire fraud alerts from suspicious property transfers, mail fraud flags, from HOA violation notices, banking irregularities from unreported cash transactions. She has been on our radar for 6 months. Walsh admitted your case provides the missing piece, proof of intent, and a documented pattern of operation, the evidence. Organization took over my entire garage. 3 long tables covered with timelines, property records, bank statements, and victim testimonies. It looked like a crime lab, complete with red string connecting incidents Emma helped after school, her teenage. Attention to detail. Perfect for cross-checking dates and amounts. Dad, she said, highlighting a transfer. Karen is like a really evil landlord who creates her own distressed properties. Exactly, sweetheart, that is exactly what she is. But the most satisfying discovery came when we pulled Karen's real estate license history. She had been disciplined in 2018 for undisclosed conflicts of interest selling property to relatives without disclosure. Her license had been suspended for 6 months. She was a repeat offender who had simply learned to hide better. Sarah was drafting a lawsuit that read like a crime novel. Federal RICO charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, conspiracy tax evasion, and a dozen other felonies. The damages alone ran into 6 figures. We are not just seeking compensation for you, Sarah said. We are dismantling an 8-year criminal enterprise and setting precedent for HOA accountability nationwide. The plan was simple. Hit her with irrefutable evidence, offer 1 chance for settlement before federal prosecutors filed charges, let her choose between paying massive damages or facing 20 years in prison. Jennifer Walsh smiled when Sarah laid it out. I love cases where the defendant documents their own crimes. Karen has been building our prosecution file for 5 years. But the more pressure we applied, the more desperate Karen became the morning after news broke about the investigation. I found a private investigator parked outside my house, some sleazy guy in a rusted Camry taking photos of Emma getting on the school bus that crossed every line I had. I walked right up to his window, gravel crunching under my boots. You want to explain why you are photographing my 16-year-old daughter just doing a job, pal? Public street, public photography, whose job he smirked and drove off without answering. But I already knew Karen was playing PI games, digging for dirt that did not exist by noon. The harassment campaign was in full. Swing the PI had been to 3 neighbors asking about my fitness as a parent, whether Emma looked neglected, Janet called me right away. Marcus, some man was asking if you drink too much, if you have strange visitors, if Emma is properly cared for. I told him to get off my property before I called police. Karen's strategy was obvious. If you cannot win on facts, destroy your opponent's reputation. But Karen underestimated how much Willowbrook had changed. The neighbors she had bullied for years were no longer afraid. Mrs. Patterson from Elm Street, the bank president's wife, called me that evening to say the investigator tried to pump her for information about me, and she told him I was the best neighbor they had ever had, and if he came back, her husband would have bank security escort him off the property. Carlos Martinez called next. "Hey man, that PI was sniffing around. I told him you fixed my electrical panel for free last winter, and anyone messing with you was messing with all of us." The community Karen had spent years dividing was starting to unite against her, but she was not done. Wednesday morning brought a visit from Child Protective Services. A social worker named Mrs. Henderson stood on my porch with a clipboard and genuine concern. "Mr. Hendricks, we received an anonymous report about possible neglect. Someone claimed your daughter appears malnourished and your home environment unstable due to ongoing legal issues. I invited her in for coffee and showed her my evidence room. Now a federal case, command center, timelines, documents, photos, everything in perfect order." She looked around and shook her head. "Sir, whoever reported this was either misinformed or malicious. Your home shows clear evidence of a devoted parent fighting for his family's rights." She closed her notepad case. "Dismissed, and between you and me, keep fighting the good fight. Karen's attacks were starting to backfire." Thursday came financial warfare. Someone reported my electrical business to the state licensing board for operating without credentials and performing unsafe work in residential areas. The inspector, Pete Kowalski, a 20-year veteran, spent an hour reviewing my license permits and references. "Marcus, your paperwork is cleaner than most contractors. I inspect someone's playing games. I'm noting this as a frivolous complaint filed with malicious intent that goes on record by Friday." Karen's desperation peaked. She tried to have my work truck towed from my own driveway, claiming it violated residential parking ordinances. The tow company called me for confirmation before hooking up. "Sir, we've got a woman here demanding we tow your vehicle, but you're parked legally on your property. She seems pretty agitated. You want us to call police?" "Yes, please do." 20 minutes later, Officer Janet Rodriguez was writing Karen a citation for filing false reports and harassment. Watching her try to explain herself to a uniformed officer while neighbors gathered on porches was the best entertainment Willowbrook had seen in years. "Ma'am, this is your third complaint this week involving Mr. Hendricks. I recommend you seek legal counsel about harassment laws before this escalates further." That evening, Sarah Martinez called. "Karen's attorney has been contacting us daily, asking about settlement. They started at $10,000. Now, they're at $50,000. Plus her resignation from all HOA positions, Karen's hemorrhaging money on legal fees and investigators, while her case weakens by the hour. But the most telling sign of her panic came. Sunday morning, Emma spotted her driving slowly past our house. At dawn, staring at the federal evidence warning signs Sarah had posted. "Dad, she looks scared. Karen Whitmore should be scared. She had spent 8 years terrorizing neighbors. Now she was learning what it felt like to be the target, her final gambit." Came on a Tuesday morning that started normal and ended with police sirens. I was having coffee when Officer Rodriguez knocked on my door, her expression apologetic, but official. "Marcus, I hate to do this, but Karen Whitmore filed a restraining order. Petition claiming you've been stalking and threatening her stalking. The woman who hired a PI to photograph my daughter was accusing me. I have security cameras covering my entire property. Want to see 8 weeks of footage proving I've never been near her. Save it for the judge." But between us, her story has more holes than Swiss cheese at the courthouse. Karen sat beside a new attorney, her fourth. Since this started, she looked different. The confident real estate queen replaced by a trembling victim in conservative clothing, Your Honor. Her attorney began. "My client has endured months of harassment. He claimed I had been photographing her property following her to work, making threatening calls." Judge Patterson looked skeptical. "Do you have Evidence. Well, Your Honor, my client fears for her safety based on his aggressive behavior and the federal investigation he initiated. Sarah stood slowly, her briefcase clicking open. Your Honor, we have comprehensive evidence proving these allegations. Our fabricated security footage, phone records, GPS data, and witness statements. She handed the judge a thumb drive. Everything is time-stamped during the alleged incidents. Mr. Hendricks was either at work miles away or at home with his daughter, the C. Judge reviewed the evidence for 15 minutes while Karen's face cycled from defiance to panic. Finally, he looked up. Filing false police reports is a crime. Your petition is denied, and I'm recommending the prosecutor review this for possible perjury charges. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I had dodged a bullet, but desperate people with nothing left to lose become dangerous in unpredictable ways. That same evening, Emma called me at work, her voice tight with controlled fear. Dad, someone broke into our house. Nothing stolen, but all your evidence boxes are torn apart, papers everywhere. I broke every speed limit getting home. The evidence room looked like a tornado had hit it. Documents, scattered photos ripped from walls, computer equipment smashed. But whoever did this was no professional burglar. They missed the backup drives hidden in my closet and the duplicate files at Sarah's office. Officer Rodriguez arrived within minutes, her flashlight cutting through the chaos. This was not random vandalism. Someone was looking for specific documents, she said, photographing the damage. Any idea who might want to destroy evidence in a federal case? Just one person desperate enough to risk felony breaking and entering. But Karen had made her biggest mistake yet in her panic to destroy evidence she left behind, evidence of destruction. Federal prosecutors love obstruction charges the next morning. Karen tried one last pathetic move. A process server delivered papers claiming KW Holdings was suing me for defamation and business interference. They wanted $200,000 for harming their investments. Sarah laughed when I showed her Marcus. This is beautiful. Karen's admitting under oath that she owns KW Holdings and that our investigation is hurting her business. She just confessed to the conspiracy we've been proving. How is that helpful? Because prosecutors can now use her own lawsuit as evidence of criminal intent. She is literally suing us for exposing her crimes. But the final straw came Thursday evening. Emma was studying at the kitchen table when a brick crashed through our front window. Attached was a note in block letters. Drop the lawsuit or lose more than windows that crossed. From harassment into terrorism. I called 911. Then Sarah, then Jennifer Walsh. Within an hour, FBI agents were processing the crime scene while neighbors gathered with offers of help. Mrs. Patterson brought Emma hot chocolate. Carlos offered to install more cameras. Janet Bennett stood guard with a rolling pin like a 73-year-old bodyguard. Agent Sarah Kim told me we are treating this as witness intimidation in a federal case that is a separate felony carrying up to 20 years. The next morning, Agent Kim called with news that made my year. We arrested Karen Whitmore at 6 a.m. Federal charges: racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. What's she looking at? 40 years if convicted. Karen had finally met an authority. She could not intimidate the United States Department of Justice. The emergency HOA meeting was set for 7 p.m. on a Thursday that felt like Christmas and Judgment Day. In one word, had spread through Willowbrook faster than gossip at a church potluck. Karen's arrest was on the evening news. Everyone wanted a front row seat. I arrived at the community center 30 minutes early to find the parking lot. Packed cars lined the street for blocks. The air buzzed with anticipation. Neighbors sharing horror stories like veterans comparing battle scars. Janet waved me to the front row. Channel 6 was there, the Columbus Dispatch, the county commissioner, too. Sarah Martinez arrived with her briefcase and a smile of pure victory. At exactly 7, the remaining board members filed in, looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. Helen Morrison called the meeting to order, her voice shaking. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to Address recent developments regarding former HOA President Karen Whitmore. Due to criminal charges filed by federal prosecutors, she has resigned all HOA positions, effective immediately. The crowd fell silent except for camera shutters. The board extends apologies to any residents who experienced inappropriate enforcement actions. Even now they could not say discrimination. Sarah stood representing not just me, but every family Karen had targeted. She opened her briefcase, pulling out a settlement. Check that seemed to glow under the lights. Karen Whitmore's criminal enterprise has been dismantled by federal authorities tonight. We announced the terms of her civil settlement, $75,000 in damages to Marcus Hendricks for harassment, discrimination, and attempted theft of property through fraudulent HOA enforcement. Applause erupted like a dam breaking. Emma clapped until her hands hurt. Neighbors hugged and cheered, but Sarah was not done. Karen is permanently banned from any HOA leadership position in Ohio. KW Holdings dissolved with all illegally acquired properties, returned to fair market value through court-supervised sales. And most importantly, this case establishes precedent. No board member in Ohio can ever again use community authority for personal gain without facing federal prosecution. I stood at the microphone 8 months ago. I thought I was fighting one woman over some windows tonight. I know we were fighting for something bigger. We proved that ordinary people can defeat corruption when they document everything, build community support, and refuse to back down. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. The celebration spilled into the parking lot. Neighbors planning the first annual Freedom from Harassment Day. Carlos announced he was running for HOA president on transparency. Mrs. Patterson offered to host a legal rights workshop. Emma hugged me. Dad, I'm proud of you. You didn't just fight for our house, you fought for everyone. And she was right. This was never just about windows or money. It was about proving that justice belongs to everyone. You've heard this confession. Now wait until you hear the next one.